So in our platform, we can do CLI in a wealth of different ways. We can use native tasks that are accessible through our automation gateway. So if I'm going to make a change to a Cisco device, I can do a Cisco. I can search for Cisco iOS, and Automation Gateway Manager will give us a list of matching tasks that I can start to do. I can start to use in an automation. And since we're going to start simple, I'm going to look for just executing a command, not even making a configuration change for an iOS device. So that should be Cisco iOS and then iOS command. Cisco iOS command. So if I drag and drop it into the workflow canvas here, then it becomes a step. Now I have to do a couple of things first. I need to create some transitions between start and end, and I can simply do that by just dragging through these drag zones here. And now essentially I've created a one-step automation workflow that can execute a command. But of course, we're missing some things. If I double click on this, this is going to expose all the variables that are necessary in order to execute a command. So off the top of your head, you kind of need two things, right? I need to know what the device is that I need to run a command on, and then I need, the command to run. And so that's what we'll do here. So if I double click this task, which came from Automation Gateway, this is more of a call we can use to directly execute a command on a Cisco CLI device or iOS device. So we can just call this execute a command. So I can change the name of it so it's a little more descriptive. Execute command on iOS device. And then looking closely here, you'll see that there's some variables that I have to fill out. So they're grouped here. So something called hosts, and you want to pay attention to the variable types, right? This is asking for us to provide a variable either statically or through some other previous task, and we'll get to that in a minute. And it needs it into the format of an array. So you need to know some basic general concepts of different variable types as they're expressed like in a JSON object. And an array is a very simple in a JSON object. It's these brackets along with, in this case, since it's a string, and then I just need to give it the device name. Now, we've already onboarded a lot of these devices into our platform. We have a federated inventory. So this comes from Automation Gateway. It's aware of our CLI devices. This is kind of a step that you would set up before you built any automations. So I'm going to give it the name of the device that it's recognized as. So this is a Cisco iOS device. It's actually virtual. It's in AWS, but it's CLI managed. So for our purposes, it works perfectly fine here. So that's one. So I've given it the host name in an array. So I've given it into the format that it needs. If I scroll down here, you'll also see I need an array of commands. So these are the commands you would type in, and you can see you get a little more help here. Give us a list of the commands you want to execute in the right order, and put it into an array is what this is asking for. And the little red asterisk here means it's a required field. So we could give it a list of commands. So again, if I'm using an array, it can be an array of one, just like the host name, and I can just do a show version. So I've statically given this one task to speak to a device. I've statically filled out two variables within the task by double clicking it. I've exposed that. I've looked at what's required here. It's an array. I've given it what it needs. It's an array with the host name, and it's an array with the command that we want to execute. And there we go. And so after that, everything else is optional. So if I close this, now I can save this, and we can actually run this and take a look at how it executes. So I'm taking the role of the network automation, the network engineer automating everything, or the network automation engineer. So I'm working strictly within the studio here. When you start to expose things out, you're probably not going to run them from the studio. You're going to run them from another place. But it makes it very useful to be able to iterate and test and things like that, like we're doing. So this was my first step. How do I automate something on a Cisco device or CLI device? And this could have easily been Junos or Arista EOS. So now I'm taking a look as the job is executed. You'll see the visualization is just like we saw in the workflow, but this is not the workflow canvas where I can modify things. This is the job actually being run. So when I hit the run button, it executed, it made a copy of it, executed it, and it's showing us executed. You'll see here that this checkbox means it executed without any problems. And again, just like filling out a variable, once I'm in the job management side of things, if I double click on a task, I can see the variables that were coming, that were fed into it. So where did these variables come from? They came from what I just typed in, right? So I statically assign these variables into the workflow for this particular task. And that's where these came from. They were required in order to execute the task, right? So it needed to execute this command on this device. So when I look at the outgoing variables, this is the information that's coming from the device, the task that was executed. And so you'll notice here that it actually did a show version. I know this is kind of embedded in a JSON. Let me see if that clears it up. But you'll see we actually got a success for the standard output, and we see all of the data that was returned from the show command. And so in the very simplest form, we just created an automation, a single step automation, doing something non-destructive like doing a show version, right? And this is an easy way to get started and to feel comfortable about, how the different features and elements work in our platform.